Hello and welcome back to another EDH deck tech idea. Today I'm featuring Roxanne, Starfall Savant. She's a 5 mana for free, and when she enters the battlefield or attacks, create a tapped colorless artifact token named Meteoroid with when Meteoroid enters the battlefield it deals 2 damage to any target, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. She also has a triggered ability which says whenever you tap an artifact token for mana, add 1 mana of any type that artifact token produced. With Roxanne you are able to control the board of small toughness creatures, and while you are doing that you are also increasing your mana advantage, which makes her a really powerful commander as she triggers on ETB and on attack, which is always really helpful. We are going to win the game by creating a huge mana advantage with Roxanne and other spells, and then going for some really powerful creatures or even some more powerful X spells. Creatures that we wanna play are, for example, Serenth Great Worm, a 6 mana 7/6 with trample, and whenever a land enters the battlefield, create a tapped Power Stone token. What a lot of people overread when looking at this card is that this trigger happens whenever a land enters the battlefield, so it also counts for your opponent's lands, which is extremely powerful in Commander. And even though the colorless mana from Power Stone tokens is limited to non-artifact spells and activated abilities, it still can be really powerful for certain scenarios. We also play Ancient Copper Dragon, a 6 mana 6/5 with flying, and when it deals combat damage to a player, roll a d20. You create a number of treasure tokens equal to the result. Roxanne's double mana trigger also works with treasure tokens, which is why Ancient Copper Dragon is a must play in this deck. Aside from Ancient Copper Dragon we also play Cavern Horde Dragon, a 9 mana 6/6, and this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest number of artifacts an opponent controls. This dragon has flying, trample and haste, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token for each artifact that player controls. In most Commander games every player uses a few ramp artifacts or also uses artifacts as key pieces for their deck, so Cavern Horde Dragon often finds a place in red decks, and especially in this one he is extremely helpful. Hellkite Igniter, a 7 mana 5/5 with flying and haste, and it also has an activated ability for 2 mana. Hellkite Igniter gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts you control. We are creating a huge mana advantage with this deck, and depending on your board state, Hellkite Igniter can become a really powerful threat as it also has haste and can hit your opponents immediately. As we are in Guru colors, we of course play Etali Primal Conqueror, a 7 mana 7/7 with trample, and when it enters the battlefield, each player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. You may cast any number of spells from among the non-land cards exiled this way without paying their mana costs. This ETB trigger is extremely powerful and will increase your lead even further. For 9 generic mana and a green Phyrexian mana you can also transform Etali, but you can only do that at sorcery speed, and it turns into Etali Primal Sickness and an 11/11 trample indestructible, and it also has a triggered ability which says whenever Etali Primal Sickness deals combat damage to a player, they get that many poison counters. You need 10 poison counters to kick a player out of the game, and when you swing with Etali and Roxanne, the Meteoroid that you create on attack might be able to clear the path to kick a player out with poison counters. We also play Karla, Fury of Avernus, a 5 mana 5/4, and whenever you attack, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap all attacking creatures. They gain first strike until end of turn. After this phase there's an additional combat phase, and you can also choose a background. Karlach will help us to generate even more Meteoroids in one turn, which is why she's definitely worth including. What is really important for us in this deck is that we bring Roxanne out as fast as possible to generate our value engine, so we need to ramp her out, for example with cards like Wild Growth, a 1 mana green enchantment, and you can enchant your land, and whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional green mana. You also play Utopia Sprawl, a 1 mana green enchantment which can enchant a forest, and as it enters the battlefield you choose a color. Whenever Enchanted Forest is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 1 mana of the chosen color. Afterwards you are going to cast Nature's Law, a 2 mana sorcery, search a library for a forest card, put that card onto the battlefield and then shuffle. Just as free visits, the same text line as Nature's Law, and afterwards you follow that up with Skyshroud Claim, a 4 mana sorcery, search a library for up to 2 forest cards, put them onto the battlefield and then shuffle your library. Another great mana advantage engine is Sveller Ice Shaper, a 3 mana 2/4, and for 3 generic and tapping her, create a colorless snow artifact token named Icy Manalith with tap, add 1 mana of any color. She also has another activated ability for 8 mana and tapping her. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may cast a spell from among them without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This deck is heavily focused on artifact tokens that create mana for you, so we also draw cards a little bit different in this deck. Unexpected Windfall, a 4 mana instant, and as an additional cost to cast a spell, discard a card. You draw 2 cards and you create 2 treasure tokens, which will help you with accelerating your game plan. A little bit cheaper is Seize the Spoils, a 3 mana sorcery. As additional cost to cast a spell, discard a card. You draw 2 cards and you create a treasure token. We also play Big Score, a 4 mana instant. As an additional cost to cast a spell, discard a card. You draw 2 cards and you create 2 treasure tokens. Maybe you are lucky and you have Strike It Rich in your opening hand, a 1 mana sorcery that lets you create a treasure token, and it also has Flashback for 3 mana. As I have just said, we are creating a lot of artifact tokens, and so we want to synergize with them, for example with Ingenious Artillerist, a 3 mana 3/1, and whenever 1 or more artifacts enter the battlefield under your control, Ingenious Artillerist deals that much damage to each opponent. Due to the fact that we are playing powerful dragons in this deck, we also play Magda, Brazen Outlaw, a 2 mana 2/1, and other dwarves you control get +1/+0. Whenever a dwarf you control becomes tapped, create a treasure token, and she also has an activated ability that says sacrifice 5 treasures. Search your library for an artifact or dragon card, put that card onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. With Magda you can find cards like Cavern Horde Dragon or also Ancient Copper Dragon, Hellkite Igniter, and so on and so on. We also play Reckless Fireweaver, a 2 mana 1/3, and whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, Reckless Fireweaver deals 1 damage to each opponent. Of course we want even more treasures, so we play Jolene, the Plunder Queen, a 4 mana 2/2, and whenever a player attacks 1 or more of your opponents, that attacking player creates a treasure token. If you would create 1 or more treasure tokens, instead create those tokens plus an additional treasure token. We can also sacrifice 5 treasures to put 5 +1/+1 counters on Jolene. There's also another version of Jolene, Jolene Plundering Pugilist, a 3 mana 4/2, and whenever you attack with 1 or more creatures with power 4 or greater, create a treasure token. You can pay 2 mana and sacrifice a treasure, so Jolene deals 1 damage to any target. Jolene is a great synergy piece with Roxanne, as Roxanne has 4 power, so on attack you will create a meteoroid and also a treasure token. For even more advantage with treasure tokens we play Professional Facebreaker, a 3 mana 2/3 with Menace, and whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. You can sacrifice a treasure at instant speed to exile the top card of your library, and you may play that card this turn. Remember that it says play, so you can also play exiled lands with this ability. You want to win more? You get it. Due to the fact that we are creating a huge mana advantage with Roxanne, we also play cards like Finale of Devastation, a 2 mana green and X sorcery, and you search your library and or graveyard for a creature with mana value X or less and put it onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. If X is 10 or more, creatures you control get +X/+X and gain haste until end of turn. If you really want to hit the theme, you play Comet Storm, a 2 mana red X instant with multi-kicker for 1, and choose any target, then choose another target for each time this spell was kicked. Comet Storm deals X damage to each of them. Furthermore, we play Crackle with Power, a 2 mana and 3 X sorcery. Crackle with Power deals 5 times X damage to each up to X targets. And when it comes to completely going over the top, we play a very powerful artifact that you can also find with Magda, for example. It's Bootlegger's Stash, a 6 mana artifact, and lands you control have tapped them to create a treasure token. Once you have brought this artifact out, you will just use your lands to create treasure tokens, and with that you basically just doubled your mana as long as Roxanne is on the battlefield. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I will play in Roxanne Starfall Savant. Let me know down in the comments below which cards you would add to the deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next, and then I would say see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.